When I was 8 years old, my father sat me down at our kitchen table, slid a dollar bill across to me, and said, "Son, this is how money works." Then he got up and went back to the couch. That was it. That was the entire lesson. Meanwhile, somewhere across town, another 8-year-old was being taught compound interest, the difference between assets and liabilities, and why the house you live in is not the investment you think it is. I didn't find out about that gap until I was 34. The financial literacy divide between wealthy families, and everyone else does not start in a bank. It starts at a kitchen table. It starts in conversations that most of us never had. According to a 2022 study by the National Endowment for Financial Education, only 24% of millennials demonstrate basic financial literacy. But that number tells only half the story, because the other half is not about intelligence. It is about access to information that wealthy families pass down quietly, generation after generation, like a secret that nobody bothered to share with the rest of us. My daughter is 7 now, and about 6 months ago, I caught myself about to repeat the exact same thing my father did. Nothing. Not because I don't care. Because I genuinely did not know what to teach her. I didn't grow up learning this stuff. My parents didn't learn it either. We were all just doing our best with whatever scraps of financial knowledge we happened to pick up along the way. That is not a character flaw. That is a wealth gap, and has been passed down just as reliably as the money itself. I spent 3 months researching what wealthy families actually teach their children about money. Not the vague motivational stuff, not the work hard and you'll be fine version, but the specific, concrete, actionable lessons that show up in study after study, in conversations with estate planners, in books written by people who grew up inside financial education and assumed everyone else had it too. What I found was both infuriating and incredibly useful. Today, I am going to walk you through the 7 lessons, and I am starting with the one that changed how I see everything. Before we get into it, if you grew up in a household where money was never discussed, where bills appeared and disappeared without explanation, where financial stress was a smell in the air rather than a conversation at the table, this video is specifically for you, because the 7 lessons I am about to share are not complicated. They are not reserved for people born with money. They are just information that has been for too long passed around inside certain circles and kept out of others. That ends today. If that gap sounds familiar, you are exactly where this channel was built for. This is Wealth Lens. Every week we break down the money stuff nobody ever taught us, in a way that actually makes sense. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe. You will not regret it. Now back to Marcus. Lesson 1 is the difference between an asset and a liability, and why most people have them backwards. Robert Kiyosaki described this in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and while the book has its critics, this core idea is held up everywhere. An asset puts money into your pocket. A liability takes money out. Wealthy families teach their children this before they understand algebra. The car you own is a liability. The stock that pays you dividends is an asset. The house you live in is a liability. The house you rent out is an asset. This single distinction, understood young, rewires how every financial decision gets made for the rest of your life. When I first heard this, I pushed back immediately. My house is an asset. I said, it has value. And technically, yes, but only when you sell it. Until then, it costs you money every single month. The mortgage, the maintenance, the insurance, the property tax. A wealthy family's child understands this at 12. They are already thinking about which things they own that pay them, and which things they own that cost them. That framing alone is worth more than most financial courses. It does not require a high income. It requires a different way of looking at the things already in your life. Lesson 2 is that money is a tool, not a reward. This one hit differently when I understood it properly. Most of us grew up treating money as something you earn and then spend, the reward for working. Wealthy families teach their children that money is a tool that can build things. You use a hammer to build a house. You use money to build more money. This shifts the relationship with every dollar. Instead of asking, what can I buy with this? The question becomes, what can I build with this? Federal Reserve data shows that the top 10% of earners hold over 70% of all financial assets in America. Not because they earn so much more, but because they build with what they earn. Lesson 3 is understanding compound interest from both directions, as a tool when you save and invest, and as a weapon when you borrow. Wealthy families teach their children that compound interest is either working for you or against you. There is no neutral. A child taught this at 10 will think twice before taking on a credit card at 22. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Americans held over $1 trillion in credit card debt in 2024. Most of that debt is growing quietly, automatically every month, because the people carrying it were never taught what compound interest actually does to a balance you do not pay off. Lesson 4 is the concept of paying yourself first, not what is left. First, before rent, before groceries, before anything. Wealthy families teach their children that the first 10% of every dollar that comes and belongs to their future, not their present. The principle is old, documented in The Richest Man in Babylon, reinforced in virtually every serious personal finance book written since. But it is rarely taught in schools, rarely modeled in working-class households, and almost never discussed in the families where financial stress is highest. Because when there is not enough, saving feels impossible. The lesson is, start anyway, even 1%, even $5. The habit matters more than the amount in the beginning. Lesson 5 is how to read a number in context, not just a price tag, but the true cost. Wealthy families teach their children to ask, what does this actually cost me? Not the sticker price, the full cost. A $40,000 car financed over 6 years at 7% interest costs closer to $50,000. That monthly payment is also an investment you are not making. At a 7% market return, the difference between buying that car with cash and putting the same money in an index fund over 10 years is not $40,000. It is closer to $80,000. This is not an argument against enjoying life. It is an argument for knowing what things actually cost before you say yes to them. Lesson 6 is that wealthy families talk about money at the dinner table, not in abstract terms. In real ones, they discuss investments. They explain business decisions. They name numbers. Children raised in these conversations grow up with a comfort around money that most of us never developed. A 2019 survey by T. Rowe Price found that children whose parents frequently discuss money are significantly more likely to be confident managing their own finances as adults. The silence in households where money is tight is understandable, but that silence is also expensive. The children who grow up in it inherit the anxiety without the tools to manage it. I started having money conversations with my daughter about 4 months ago. Not complicated ones, small ones. When I paid at the grocery store, I told her what I spent and why. When I decided not to buy something, I explained the decision out loud. She is 7. She does not understand all of it, but she is listening. And she is building a relationship with money that is based on information rather than mystery or fear. That shift alone, from money as a mysterious, stressful force to money as something you can understand and influence, is a foundation that every other lesson sits on. Lesson 7 is perhaps the most important and the most difficult to hear. Wealthy families teach their children that they are responsible for their own financial outcomes, not in the toxic, pull yourself up way that ignores systemic barriers. Those are real, they are documented, and they matter. But in the sense that the decisions you make within whatever constraints you face are still decisions, and they compound over time just like money does. A person who consistently makes slightly better financial decisions than their circumstances seem to allow ends up in a genuinely different place a decade later. That is not inspiration. That is arithmetic. Here is the part of this that gets me. None of these 7 lessons require wealth to learn or to teach. They require time and intention. They require deciding that your children, or you, right now, reading this as an adult, deserve the information that was quietly passed around inside families that had already figured some of this out. The gap is real. The system that created the gap is real. But the information itself is available. You are watching it right now. And what you do with it from this point forward is a decision that matters. Last Saturday morning, I sat down with my daughter at the kitchen table. I put 3 jars in front of her. I labeled them spend, save, and give. I explained what each one was for. I told her that every time she received money, birthday money, pocket money, anything, She was going to decide how to split it between the 3 jars. She immediately wanted to put everything in spend. I expected that. We talked about it. She ended up putting some in save because she told me there's a book she wants that costs more than she has. She made a financial plan. She is 7 years old. That conversation cost me nothing. It took 11 minutes. It was the single most important financial lesson I have given my daughter, not because of the jars, but because of what the jars represent. Money is not a mystery. It is not a source of shame or silence or stress that children should sense but never understand. It is a tool. It has rules. And when you know the rules, you play the game differently. I did not have that conversation until I was well into my 30s. She is having it at 7. That gap is closing in 1 generation. That is what this is about. Whether you are a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, or an uncle, or someone who is simply learning these things for yourself right now, none of this is too late. The 7 lessons work at any age. The asset and liability distinction works whether you're 25 or 55. Paying yourself first works whether you can put aside $5 or $500. Understanding the true cost of things works every time you are about to sign something. The compounding works in your favor the moment you decide to let it. This is not about becoming wealthy overnight. It is about moving in a consistently better direction year after year with clear eyes. And here is what I want you to take from this today. The fact that you were not taught these things is not your fault. The families who had these conversations were not necessarily smarter or harder working. They just had access to a set of ideas earlier. That access is the entire advantage. Nothing else. And now you have it too. What you do with it is entirely up to you. But I will tell you this. I am not going to let my daughter reach 34 years old wondering why nobody told her. She is going to know. And so are your kids if you start the conversation. Here is the question I want you to answer in the comments. And I am asking this honestly, not to make anyone feel bad. What is the one money lesson you wish someone had taught you as a child? Just one. Because I want to read every single answer. And I am going to use the most common ones to shape what this channel covers next. Your answer matters. Drop it below. And if this video gave you something you're going to use, even one thing, subscribe to Wealth Lens. Every week we are here helping you see money differently.